Curious about taking pleasure to the next level? Discover how orgasm control goes far beyond edging, exploring techniques like forced orgasms and orgasm denial to create intense connection, arousal, and submission. I'm Brandon the Dom. Let's dive in. So orgasms are pretty great, right? But what if you could dial up the sexual pleasure, making it more intense, exhilarating, and downright addictive? Enter the world of orgasm control. Simply put, orgasm control is when a submissive surrenders control of their orgasms to the dominant, allowing the dom to dictate their pleasure and their ultimate relief. It's a practice that's often favored by pleasure doms, which I made a video about. Many of you have probably seen, but if you haven't, I'll leave a link down below. Now, the most common form of orgasm control is edging, which is basically teasing your partner by stopping any stimulation before they climax, then waiting around 30 seconds or so, and then continuing. And this cycle of basically bringing them up, stopping, letting them come back down a bit, and then bringing them up again, just repeats and repeats until you basically want to let them orgasm. And edging is incredible. The teasing, the denial, and then the final release all feel amazing. However, what we're going to talk about in this video is the countless other ways that you can control your submissive's orgasms and hopefully drive them wild. If those things weren't enough, let's talk a little bit about why people enjoy orgasm control. Orgasm control basically brings intensity to sex, either psychologically through the expression of power and control, or physically through overwhelming pleasure. And this is quite pertinent because most of the time when you're having sex, it's to reach orgasm for both of you, hopefully. And so very few times are you denying yourself that ability or changing the way that that orgasm comes about. And so this introduces both new psychological and physical elements. But some other reasons include omnipotence. Humans are basically wired to seek pleasure. When someone else controls that pleasure, it can create a powerful sense of dependency and submission on that person. With orgasm control, the submissive's desires intensifies, becoming an insatiable craving, sort of like a heroin addict that needs their next fix. And the dominant holds complete control of that. Another reason is it leads to very intense orgasms. Being teased and denied release while being stimulated can feel really maddening, building a lot of arousal and energy. When finally allowed to release, the orgasm is much more powerful and intense. Another reason is attachment. So consistent use of various forms of orgasm control can deepen emotional bonds, especially when the dominant becomes the sole source and director of the submissive's pleasure. Of course, this should be practiced with caution and make sure you are consciously and with consent engaging in that. It can also be helpful for long distance relationships. Controlling a partner's orgasms from afar can help them to feel their dominant's presence, reinforcing that dynamic even when you two can't physically be together. And then it also deepens awareness. Orgasm control heightens a lot of the sensations of what you're feeling. That allows the submissive to more easily focus in on the pleasure that they're experiencing. And this can sometimes lead to subspace. I also made a video on subspace. I'll leave a link to that down below. Now let's talk about the various ways you can practice orgasm control. The only orgasm control that you've ever tried is edging. You're missing out on the vast possibilities of the practice. When you're given control of the submissive's orgasms, you have the ultimate say in how, when, and where she is allowed to orgasm. So here's some popular ways to do it. Obviously, edging. You basically arouse and stimulate your partner to the point of orgasm, then stop stimulation and let their arousal subside. And then repeat this process over and over again until you decide you want to let them climax, or not at all, up to you. Another practice is having them ask permission. So basically having them ask permission every single time they want to orgasm. This can get a little tiring after a while for either side, but if your partner really enjoys it and you enjoy it, it can actually be quite hot to have them keep asking every time. The more intense version of this is having them beg. So you can intensify their desire and reinforce your authority by making them beg to come. And usually what I do is when they make that first beg, I say, I can't hear you. And I make them beg again. And then I say louder and make them beg and beg and beg. And you try and usually compel them to be more explicit about exactly what it is they want, rather than just a simple beg of daddy, please. The next practice you can do is denial. So if you're feeling particularly sadistic or playful, you might deny their orgasm, basically refusing their relief from the pleasurable sensations until you decide. You can also ruin their orgasm. So here you're bringing your submissive to the brink of climax, just barely letting them to start to orgasm, and then basically ruining it by stopping all stimulation or interrupting with some sort of distracting action, which is going to leave them very frustrated. You can also force orgasms. So here you're forcing your consenting submissive to orgasm, even if they don't necessarily want to be orgasming in that moment. Remember, with orgasm control, you're in control. You dictate when and where an orgasm is going to happen. That's kind of the philosophy behind a forced orgasm. Something that often accompanies forced orgasm is overstimulation. So here you're bringing your partner to orgasm, but instead of stopping sensations and letting them recover, you continue to stimulate them, often pushing them to experience several more intense orgasms that follow. Another practice is orgasm torture. Here you're basically continuing stimulation, so you're doing overstimulation, and they may go through several orgasms, but instead of them being pleasurable, eventually that overstimulation becomes painful. And if you're going to torture them, you persist with that stimulation. You can also do cool things with orgasms like anchoring. So here you're going to heighten their orgasm by linking the sensation of orgasm to a specific word or phrase, or maybe even a specific touch, basically allowing you to train orgasm on command. Now, this can also be done for specific actions. So something that I like to do is start training orgasms around giving me oral, so that eventually giving me oral brings them a lot of arousal in and of itself. You can also set rules or protocol around orgasms. So one of my favorites has always been to instruct my submissive to masturbate in the 48-hour window before they see me, but they're not allowed to come. So they can masturbate as much as they want, but no orgasms until they see me. You can also have them wear chastity belts. So basically a chastity belt does not allow access to the genitals, which would mean that orgasms are for you and only for you. Some chastity belts also include a plug or a dildo that basically remains inserted while that person wears it. You can also practice mental chastity. So this is kind of like the rules that I had mentioned earlier, where you're basically setting a rule that they are not allowed to orgasm, or even setting a rule they're not allowed to masturbate or have sex, despite no physical barrier actually keeping them from doing that. It's all just a mental chastity. Along similar lines, you can set up a masturbation schedule with them. So you might actually require them to masturbate or orgasm a certain number of times during the day or the week, or vice versa, forbid it entirely and make her ask permission to orgasm when she's masturbating. So here you're basically using a control to figure out, okay, how much arousal do I want to build up in her before I allow release? And you can do that with rules and schedules for those things. You can also engage in remote play. So have them wear a remote control device, such as a vibrator, basically to have them orgasm either remotely, or if you guys are out in public together during public play, this is something that you could use. Another form is erotic hypnosis. So here, it's sort of like anchoring, where you're using hypnotic suggestions in order to make associations or to make your submissive orgasm. And then the last one that I'll mention is orgasm games. So basically create games where your submissive has to complete some sort of task, choose a number, or succeed at something in order to earn permission to orgasm. You can also set up random selection games and make it a choice between edging, ruining, forced, denial, or regular orgasms. Now let's talk about a few things to consider when engaging in orgasm control. First and foremost, how easily does the submissive orgasm? So for some submissive leaning women, orgasm control can be extremely frustrating if they already struggle to orgasm on their own. So restricting or forcing orgasms in these cases are going to worsen that challenge, and they're going to create a disconnect between pleasurable sensations and orgasm, or they're just going to make her feel inadequate. So orgasm control may be better suited for people that more easily orgasm. That said, if your partner enjoys physical or emotional masochism, humiliation, or degradation, this sort of scenario that I just mentioned might actually be enjoyable for them. So as always, talk with your specific submissive. Discuss boundaries, desires, and concerns before diving into orgasm control. Another consideration is orgasm control in multiple partners. So if you and your partner engage in ethical non-monogamy, rules around orgasms can be sort of complex, and it may impact your partner's enjoyment of sex with their other partners. So you guys will need to sit down and decide whether rules are temporarily lifted when they're seeing their other partners, or if boundaries should be negotiated between everyone involved. There's no right or wrong answer here, only what works for you and your dynamics. And as always, open and honest communication is required to navigate these types of scenarios. And then the last consideration I want to mention is long-term practice of orgasm control. So I started to allude to this earlier in the psychological part of orgasm control, but doing this practice long-term can create deep dependency and attachment to someone. In a committed relationship, this can strengthen bonds and foster trust, build greater connection, and reinforce the power exchange. However, in less committed or casual relationships, it may lead to unwanted emotional depth if you guys didn't want to go that deep. So as always, communication is key. In a casual dynamic, you might limit orgasm control to short-term scenes or specific scenarios in order to enjoy that intensity without the long-term attachment. On the other hand, if you're both open to deepening your bond, orgasm control can be one of the tools to create deeper connection and trust. So orgasm control, besides just being some fun thing that you do or just being edging, it's a powerful tool for deepening trust, building intimacy, and exploring the rich parts of power exchange. For a pleasure dom that may enjoy pushing the boundaries of pleasure, this practice offers countless ways in order to tease, deny, and ultimately reward the submissives. If you'd like an example of a sort of scene that I've done with orgasm control, I'll leave a link down below where you can download an example scene and get started with practicing orgasm control. So whether you're a dominant seeking to master control or a submissive yearning for the pleasure of surrender, orgasm control can create intense sensations, deepen attachments, and even guide a submissive into the depths of subspace. And if you're interested in what the subspace is, I recommend checking this video out. It's going to go into all the details of that and just how pleasure might help you get there. So check out that video, and thank you so much for your time and attention.